The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
You are in Read to Be Ready in the ESL classroom. This is really could be Read to Be Ready in the regular classroom as well. It's just good teaching. I am Rebecca Cogdal. Most of you know me, some of you in this room, as Becky. I taught kindergarten for 6 years, and I've taught ESL for 14 years. This will be my 21st year in education this year. And then
I'm Shannon Holland. I kind of a little bit of everything going on with education. I taught kindergarten for 3 years, and then I taught with Becky for 11 years as an ESL teacher. And I'm really excited today because for the past 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, I've been the RTI coach in my building. And Becky and I haven't really got to do this. We used to present a lot together. And so I feel like this is bringing the team back together. And I looked at her this morning and I said, I know this is going to sound really strange because you always get nervous presenting in front of a crowd, but I'm like, I almost feel like I'm at home being back with the ESL teachers. And I'm just excited to get to present with Becky again. So I've also been a Read to Be Ready coach for the state for the past 2 years. I've trained in Rutherford County. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is things that we have presented out to our classroom teachers throughout the state. Some of you may be a part of this already. Some of this may be new information, but it's going to be kind of presented in the angle of this is what it is and this is what it could look like in the ESL classroom, because your kiddos need different things and different supports. And our contact information is on here, and I hope you get something out of this. Please feel free to contact Becky or I if you have questions afterwards. Here are some success criteria we want you to walk away with today. This is, if we've been successful, then you're going to understand or at least get a taste of what some of these things are. But we want you to first be able to identify high quality text. And you're probably sitting there going, whatever, I know a good book when I see it. And that's true. We all have that ability to say, I know what a good text is. But looking through the realms of Read to Be Ready and teaching content and teaching language, what is a good high quality book worthy of a child's time and attention and your time instructing it. Also, we're going to talk about choosing vocabulary words that build knowledge. We can pull vocabulary words, but we want to make sure we're pulling vocabulary words that are purposeful and build knowledge. We also are going to talk about identifying the differences and importances between an interactive read aloud, a shared read aloud, and a guided reading. Those are three major parts to a reading component program, and there's differences to those, and we are just going to give you a sampling of what that looks like with Read to Be Ready. And then we want you to experience a high quality task that build knowledge and language, and Becky has done a fabulous job putting that together for you guys to see kind of what that looks like outside of the classroom setting and in an ESL setting. All right, so just a little brief snippet. I just want to tell you now, there's a lot that goes into Read to Be Ready and what the state is putting out. The state has also put out an ELL manual that corresponds with Read to Be Ready, because no matter what student we have in front of us, they all need good, solid reading instruction and support. And this, what I'm going to talk to you today about and what Becky's going to show you, it's just good, solid instruction no matter where you're at. So I wanted to touch base a little bit about the theory of the action that we're going to talk about. And keep in mind, this has been a 2-year process, so what you're going to get in an hour is just really a snippet, and then that's it. So if you have questions, there are resources we'll share with you at the end. The reason Read to Be Ready got started is because students in 3rd grade are coming out not able to read or read well. And they're also dropping. So if you have 5 students in the 3rd grade that come out proficient, by the time they enter 5th grade, only one of those students will be, or I'm sorry, only 4 of those students will be proficient, 1 will be at basic, and 2 will be advanced. So where you had in 3rd grade 5 students at advanced, only 2 go to advanced, 3 are dropping to proficient, and 1 is at basic. So we're losing ground, which seems odd that if they can do this in 3rd grade, why aren't they growing? And a lot of that has to do with how we're presenting content and reading to them. This also really hits our subgroups. 30% in our Black, Hispanic, and Native American population, 30% are at basic. English language learners, 22%. Our economically disadvantaged, 32% are at basic, and 20% are at basic. So we've got a lot of room to grow, and the state wants us having 75% of our students at or above grade level when they leave, and that is in 2025, that's our goal. So how are we going to do that? Well, by presenting a good, strong reading framework, the Teaching Literacy in Tennessee. So what that looks like is engaging in high volume of reading. When you're in a reading class, what should you be doing? Reading. That sounds simple enough, but guess what? We're not. That's the big problem. In a reading class for 90 minutes, research has shown that only maybe 5-10 minutes of that is actually children engaging in high quality text. So stop and think about, what are we doing if we're not reading? If they're not reading, we're not reading to them, we're not reading with them, what are they doing? Okay, so then the next piece to this is reading and listening to complex texts that are at or beyond their grade level. Just because a student can't speak, just because a student can't read, and this is in the classroom or an ESL student, doesn't mean we don't still expose them to high quality text. How many of you have kids and as soon as they came out of the womb, you started reading to them? Somewhere along the way, we've lost that. We need to be exposing them, even if they can't read it or they can't understand all of the words in English, we're still exposing them to that and providing those supports and those scaffolds so that it is comprehensible. Another one is thinking deeply about and responding to text through speaking and writing, and we're going to talk about that, how important speaking is. And talking to a classroom full of ESL teachers, you know speaking is vital to get our kids where they need to be. Developing the skill and craft of a writer, and I know I've talked to Becky, if you've given the WIDA, that's probably one of the hardest things to get kids to do, but it's also very hard for an English-speaking child to do. My daughter's in 2nd grade going into 3rd. Some of the things that she came home writing, I'm like, yeah, we're nowhere near where we need to be. And then practicing foundational skills that have been taught explicitly and systematically and applied through reading and writing. So what we've done in the past is we've taught fragments of isolated skills. What we've got to do, and what we're going to talk about and what you're going to kind of see today, is how we're still going to teach those phonics skills. They are still very much important. And if you don't teach those foundational skills, kids won't read. It's not like a magic thing where, oh, we're going to read to them now and all our troubles will be done. No, we still have to teach those explicit and systematic foundational skills. But the difference is there's a purpose and it is now tied to reading. So they're not getting an isolated one and done. It's going to be put together and brought together, and we're going to be making those connections. And I know I feel like I'm speaking to the choir here because as ESL teachers, gen ed teachers, we know the importance of making those connections. The more connections you make with something, the better it sticks. I mean, just think about it. How many of us have sat in our own classrooms as a student and done a grammar lesson and then moved over here to do something else? And you're like, why did I need to learn that mess? There was no connection there. And then later you're like, when you're writing a paper or something like that, you're like, what was that? I remember learning that a long time ago over here in an isolated grammar lesson or phonics lesson. but there was never that connection made. And that's what we want to do for Read to Be Ready, is it's making connections so that when kids learn this, they immediately have the opportunity to apply it, seeing the connection. And we're doing that through content. This is what the state is putting out for teaching literacy in Tennessee. And this, to me, is the backbone of what we're trying to do. First thing, you want everything rooted and grounded in content. I remember when I was doing my state training, I was texting Becky going, hey, this sounds a lot like our ESL training, where we're teaching through content and making those connections. That's the whole, I mean, how many times did I send you a text going, this sounds awful lot. So I'm sitting here going, that's it, everybody needs ESL training. Across the state, everybody needs this. But we want to look at our content standards, our science and our social studies. Then, once you have looked at your science and social studies standards and you understand what the content is you're teaching, you decide on that enduring learning, this enduring understanding. What is it you want the students to get from this lesson? Now, I want you to keep in mind, I'm giving you a very brief synopsis of how in-depth this is. There's a lot more complexity to this. I've been working with some teachers for 3 days now, designing a unit. So this goes much deeper, but I'm giving you just kind of an overview. We want to develop an enduring understanding. And what I've told my teachers is an enduring understanding is really, what do you want them to get out of this? What do you want them to be able to do and to know at the end of the unit? Then you're going to decide your essential questions. What questions are you going to need to ask? What questions stick out that are going to go across all your content areas, all of your ELA reading standards? What questions do you need to ask? Then you choose your text. And I'm going to tell you right now, we think that's easy because we all have those go-to books. We all have that book that says, girl, I know that book is going to cover pumpkins. I've read it every year. It is fabulous. It works. But what we've discovered is when you do this correctly and you really look at what your standards are telling you, your content standards, and then you develop those questions, the book that you love may not be the book you need to go with. So don't close your mind on or pigeonhole yourself into that's what I'm going to choose. So you choose your text around the questions and the content you're wanting to teach. Now, this is something that's interesting. Once you've chosen your text, then you look at your reading standards and you decide what fits naturally. How many of us have been trying to plug in reading standards? I'm going to make that fit. That's going to fit. Oh, look, I'm a teacher. I can make anything work. How many of y'all have done that? Please do not leave me hanging because I know you lying if you say you have not. Lie. We have all been there. I don't know. I think I've told Becky, oh, don't worry, Becky. We can make that work. But really, when you look at it deeply, if you choose the text and then look at how that text naturally flows with the reading standard, it fits so much better. And your lessons, there again, connect. You design your end of unit task. So this is where what is it that your big goal is that you want them to do? And it's going to hinge around writing. What kind of writing piece, what kind of activity are you going to have them do at the end? So you decide that first, because then your lesson sequence and your daily tasks are going to come. What are you going to have them do to get them to that end of unit? And the end of unit should not, let me repeat, should not be a surprise. If you've done it well and supported them, you've given them a piece of it every day so that when they get to that end of unit, they can do it and you've supported it. So that's where the daily tasks come in. What are you doing each day? A little piece of writing, a little piece of graphic organizer, just talking. What are you doing each day? Now, I know a lot of you are taking pictures of this. This is on the state website. Everything I'm going to show you today that I'm going to talk about is on the state website. Anything that Becky talks about, you'll have to contact her directly to get her expertise on that. So, this is another big slide from Read to Be Ready, and I want you just to take a look at it. And I want you to just note, what do you notice about this diagram?
It's the 4 modes of language.
Yep. What do you notice about speaking and listening?
They span everything.
They span everything. So everything is important, but I want you to take away with that speaking and listening covers each part of that. A lot of my teachers this year said, oh, our writing is not so good. And I said, okay, let me come in and watch. So I come in and I watch, and I'm like, at the end, I do my coaching conversation. I'm like, so, who was doing the most of the talking? And what we find is, or I'll list off the questions they're asking, the teachers did the talking. The kids didn't. The way we get good writers is we've got to allow them time to practice talking and thinking. And the big thing about Read to Be Ready is you're going to read about it, you're going to think about it, you're going to talk about it, and you're going to write about it. So the big pieces are all here. You have your interactive read aloud, your shared read, your small read, and your independent, because they all need to have some independent reading time. Then your writing, same thing. Modeled writing, where you're modeling it for them. The shared and interactive writing. The shared writing is where they're telling you what to write, and you're writing it for them. Still explicitly teaching those foundational skills. But now the difference is it is within them talking and telling you their ideas. Same thing with the reading. You're teaching it within the reading. The small group writing, just like small group reading, you're bringing them to the table and you're hitting that instructional level that they are on at that time. And then the independent writing, same thing with independent reading. They do it on their own. But in every stage, that listening and speaking component is huge. If they're not listening to the stories and being exposed to it and having good quality instruction from you, how are they going to be able to be anything to talk about, anything to write about? So the listening and speaking piece is huge. And then, of course, with our ESL kids, providing those scaffolds so that they can access it. But you'd be surprised at how many of our Gen Ed kids cannot access this either. It's very surprising. But I want to say this. When done well, it's a little overwhelming, but the kids can do it. And some of the things they've done, Becky's going to show you, are amazing. And then, once again, the explicit and systematic foundational instruction. You can teach a mini lesson on grammar and phonics, word attack. You can teach a mini lesson on that, but then you're always going back and teaching and making those connections and showing the kids how those things connect. And then you can also teach it within the text. When you've got those moments and you're reading and you're talking or you're writing, teaching within the text as well. How do we choose good quality text? So there's a triangle. The triangle is the strongest shape. It's hard to break it. So in order to make good, strong readers and writers, we have to have all of these components of the triangle. We have to have quantitative, and quantitative is the Lexile level. But I will caution you, just because it has a high Lexile level doesn't mean it's good quality. The qualitative piece comes in from you, and I always think quality teacher. A machine can't tell you what is quality. That becomes you. The quantitative Lexile level score, that's telling you, that's looking at the word length, word choice. Qualitative, same kind of thing. You're looking at the syntax, the semantics. But you're also looking at, will my kids be interested in this? What point in the year are they for this material? What am I going to have to scaffold and give them background knowledge on? Those are the pieces that you have to do as the teacher looking at the text. And then the next piece is you have to look at the reader and task. Will your kids even enjoy this book? Is it worthy of their time? Can you get good questions out of it? I sat with a teacher and she said, I just can't get anything out of this book. And I said, well, I think you've answered your own question. Do you need to use this book? And it's not that you can't use the book. You could still read it as a one and done, but you're not going to use that as your anchor text. You're not going to teach from that. So that's kind of just an overview there. I will say this, for an interactive read aloud, you want to shoot for 2 grade levels above their grade level. For your ESL kids, that's where you as the ESL teacher are going to have to really look at that qualitative measure. We want it 2 grade levels above, but some of your kids may be 2 grade levels behind. So you want to look at where they're at and go 2 grade levels from that, exposing them just to good quality text. So that qualitative piece is going to be huge at you looking at and knowing what your kids are ready for and how much support to give them. So this is a read aloud that Becky's going to talk about here in just a moment. She's going to talk to you about the true story of the little pigs that she does in her ESL classroom. But I wanted just to show you the quantitative, qualitative, and reader task. So quantitatively, this is an 80-5-10, which means it's adult directive. Now, this would be an ideal choice for kindergarten, but now Becky's got an ESL kindergarten classroom, so it's going to look a little bit different. But as far as kindergarten, this is 2 grade levels above, and it's AD, which means adult directive. You're going to have to support them a little bit more at understanding this. It's not just straightforward. Qualitative, that's the teacher looks at the text and reviews. Take into consideration the time of year and what your students may or may not know, and the subject matter. What are they ready for? Sometimes it may be towards the end of the year and you're like, oh, they're ready for more than this. So you've got to weigh those options. You're also looking at the vocabulary. You're looking at, again, you are looking at the sentence structure, the word choice, because you are the major piece to this. You can have a good quantitative level and it stink. And then the reader task, does the story appeal to the students and does it lend itself to the content that you're trying to teach? And is it going to lend itself to reading standards that you're wanting to try to teach? All right, and then this we put together is like a text set. The 3 Little Pigs would be your anchor text. Then you could read another one, just the regular 3, or this is the true story of the 3 Little Pigs. You would pair it with the 3 Little Pigs to do activities with. And then these would become your shared read, where you're going to read with the students. So this is what a text set could look like. Because with this, you want to expose them more to just one book. You're trying to get them lots and lots of reading and lots of information. And everything you choose for them needs to be taught with a purpose. What is your purpose? And that's where those content standards come in. So we just looked at a text set. I want to just quickly go over with you what a strong text set would look like. It would build student knowledge around a concept, which we just talked about. It's going to include authentic and rich text. There are some texts out there that are just not worthy of our time, but you're going to have to be the judge of that, lowering your content standards, understanding what a quality text looks like. You want to immerse the kids in language and in text, and it's not always a book. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Poems, articles, graphic organizers, all of those count as reading materials. But my teachers kind of got away and shied away from using poems and songs. But I'm like, guys, those are good, strong reading materials too that build knowledge. So don't shy away from that. Video clips, any of that can go in making a text set. And then, like I said, it includes texts that represent various forms of complexity. So we've looked at some things this year that we were like, oh, that's kind of low level. But it has a lot of good information. Put it in there. Your anchor text is the one that's 2 grade levels above, but don't shy away. If it's got good content, put it in there and read it to them. Everything you're doing with this is building content. You're building knowledge. And then again, I just put this back in here so that you could see how that text set went with this. We looked at the standards. We've developed an enduring understanding and essential questions, text selection, end of unit task, lesson sequence, and daily task. And you're fixing to see Becky go through that.
Now, Shannon is highly trained on Read to Be Ready. She is the state coach. She's been to many hours of Read to Be Ready. She's presented it a lot. I am not highly trained on Read to Be Ready, but like she said, she kept texting me saying, oh, this is ESL. This is ESL. Everybody needs ESL training. So I have sat in on some of her trainings. The state didn't make it mandatory for us to do, but I wanted to see and kind of go with the building and try and incorporate the Read to Be Ready into what ESL is doing already. So what I'm going to show you, I'm not Shannon, Read to Be Ready, but this is ESL. So the first thing that we do is we look at our content standards. I pull science and social studies. We see the kids during their science and social studies time and their writing ELA time. And so we look at their content standards first, and we look at how can we teach that, what kind of book could we use. A lot of times we'll YouTube books and listen to them to see if they're any good. And we'll sit as a team in PLCs and listen to books and think about questions that would be good for the kids, or how could we do a STEM activity with that? What kind of writing task at the end could we do with that? Is it good? Is it not good? So we worked very well as a team. If I had to be by myself, it would be really hard. So I love my team and the support that we have for each other. So in this this is the new kindergarten science standards, and plan and conduct an investigation to describe and classify different kinds of materials, including wood, plastic, metal, cloth, and paper by their observable properties, color, texture, hardness, flexibility, and whether they are natural or human-made. Also conduct an investigation to understand that matter can exist in different states, solids and liquids. And then construct an evidence-based account of how an object made of a small set of pieces, blocks, snaps, cubes, can be disassembled and made into a new object. So from this, you also have your STEM, your engineering. They're really big into the STEM this year. If you haven't been to any of the science training, you're going to be doing a lot of STEM, which I love STEM in the classroom. After we get, this is just an example of like the language. So we'll have science standards and science objectives, and we'll also have language objectives. So I teach kindergarten and first grade, and so we put pictures in there. And so this is just an example. I can listen carefully to a story so I can identify the character, setting, problem, solution. I'm successful when I can identify which character is bad and tell why. So then I continue to ask, what are we doing today? And we can refer back up here. This really helps our kids, the little ones.
What you're fixing to see is Becky, as she's choosing her text, she set her standards, she's got her goals. Next, we're going to look at vocabulary, and vocabulary is going to be huge. When you are looking at vocabulary, you are wanting to look at what the kids need to know that is going to hinder their understanding of the story. And I'm sure I could sit down this book and you guys could find 52,000 vocabulary words that you're like, oh my gosh, I need to teach them that. But here's the difference. There are tiers of vocabulary. You have tier 1 words that are common. This is what the kids hear just in conversation. And these are words that your ESL kids are probably going to pick up quickly that you don't necessarily need to spend time teaching that unless you really feel like they just don't have this information. And then if you really feel like they just can't understand some of the basic words, you may need to gear it back down. There again, looking at that qualitative piece. Tier 2 words are the words you really want to target. Those are the words such as hilarious, endure, arrange. Words that they're not going to be familiar with but are going to add to their background knowledge. That's going to add to their writing. And those are words you want to look for in your book. Now, tier 3 words are your low frequency words, and they're really specific to content areas, such as continent, molecule, agriculture. Those are unit vocabulary words that you can kind of just touch on, but you're not going to explicitly teach, okay? And then there's 3 ways to teach vocabulary. There's explicit, where you know they've got to know this word. You want them using it in their writing. You want them using it in their speaking. This is the word that you're going to follow a routine and teach and give sentences. Then there are those words that are embedded, whereas you come to it, you just touch base like sneeze, achoo, and move on. There's no need to really go into it. Then there's the implicit, where you're really not even going to talk about it. It's just going to go in the flow of the story. You might talk about it in general, but you're just going to let it kind of happen in the conversation, in the story. You're not really going to pull it out and draw attention to it. And you're definitely not going to stop your instruction to teach it. So when you're choosing those words, like Becky's going to show you they pulled out, you really want to look at words that they have to know, that are vital for them to understand the story, or you really feel like are just great words that you want them to know, and you want to keep it to about 5. I'm just going to touch base real quick. I put this in here just so you can kind of see. One of the words was rude from the story that I pulled out, and I want you to see how I did it and then how Becky did it for the ESL kiddos. So there's the word rude, there's a picture, then I'm giving them a child-friendly definition, not being nice, and then I'm giving them a sentence from the story. I can also give them a sentence, or I can have them create a sentence after they understand it. But that rude little porker insulted my granny. So they're seeing it different ways within a sentence, within the story. They've got a picture, and then you might want to talk about the structure of that word.
Okay, I chose to show you all the Three Little Pigs because that's a book everybody knows. So I wouldn't have to sit up here and read you a story. So I've handed out some apples. So I saw this at an in-service and I loved it. So look, I want you to get with the people that are beside you, and I want you to write down as many adjectives as you can with that apple. It's a clean apple. You can eat it if you want. Just write down as many adjectives as you possibly can. I'll give you about a couple minutes.
Juicy.
Ooh, good one. You'll have to excuse my.
This group, you guys had 21. How many do you have now? Okay, so they went from 21 to about half now by looking at just a picture. Okay, so now take the picture away, and you only have the word manzana. How many are you going to have now? Right? So you might have a handful. If you don't have any knowledge of that word, how many are you going to have? 0. So this is so important. Pictures are great. We use pictures all the time, but if you can bring in the real thing, that is so much better. So, the Three Little Pigs. The reason I have bad on here is because I know my end task is going to be they have to justify who was bad, the pig or the wolf, and why. So they really need to understand what does bad mean. And I have some kids that they're newcomers to the country. They've only been there for maybe a month or 2. They need to understand bad in different contexts that we use them. I'm teaching them the word brick and stick and straw, but really I bring all of that in, and I really didn't want to bring all the bricks and have to walk around MTSU campus today. But I really want them to understand different words. I want them to understand brick, but I want them to understand words like solid. This is a solid. It has a shape. What shape is it? How does it feel? Is it heavy? Is it light? So by bringing in the real things, they're going to learn words like solid, heavy, strong, weak, long, skinny, tall, square, rectangle, wide, rough, bendable, hard, breakable. We're going to go through and everybody's going to hold it, and they're going to compare the brick to the sticks and the straw. Can you break it? Well, which one was easier to break? Which one couldn't you break? Is it wide, skinny? Because at the end, my STEM activity is going to be they have to construct a house that the wolf couldn't blow down. So we have our hairdryer and we have to blow it down. So I want them to understand, is it better to have something that is sturdy, a sturdy wide base? Or when I pick this material, I'm going to know by walking around who understood by what materials they're grabbing to build their house with. I already know who got it and who didn't get it, because I can tell whose house is going to stay up and whose is going to fall down.
And this would be her end of unit task. Becky's planned this with the end goal in mind. My kids need to know these words because they're going to do this end task. And she's building this knowledge through this anchor text.
So we have our anchor chart. You can talk about different solids all week. This is just a little piece of things that I've done. You can talk about solids and liquids. You can talk about all kinds of materials during the week that are solids, and how does it compare to this solid and this solid, and how do you know it's a solid? It keeps its own shape, and how is it a liquid? How is it different?
Okay, so what you saw Becky kind of doing there is she was building vocabulary. And some of the words that she chose were words that might not necessarily be in the book. Well, she chose straw, brick, and sticks. Those are in the book, but look how many other words she got through that week by teaching specific vocabulary words that she targeted and the content that now she's connecting that to, and those science standards. In the past, we've kept reading and science separate. Now it's coming together. They're reading about it. This book was 2 grade levels above, and she's now made connections to those science standards that the kids now understand. Oh, I read this for more than just sitting and talking about a pig and a wolf, and that was so much fun. Now it's become, oh, I've got science standards. I'm learning about a solid and which one's stronger, which one's going to hold up, which one would change. And they're also hitting that engineering standard. And then she's teaching the vocabulary and the meaning, which are those reading and listening and speaking standards that we have to hit. So what she did is, like I said, we got to start with the end goal in mind, a culminating task. The culminating task is what's going to happen at the end of the week with each book that you're doing for that week. Now, if you're doing, my teachers were trying to get them to do 2, even more than 2 in a week to build knowledge. But your culminating task is bringing everything that you read about in that week together, focused on your anchor text, which the anchor text was the true story of the 3 little pigs. But they have to have some knowledge, and she read, in addition to that, the 3 little pigs. Then, once you know your culminating task, you design those daily tasks. What activities are you going to do daily to set them up for success to get to the culminating task? And then that's how you design your questions. And every day, there need to be scaffolded questions. Do not come in on day 1 and throw out this big question of, so, who do you think was the bad person here in this story, and tell me why? You got to set them up. So every day, you're going to look at that story. You're going to revisit that story, and you're going to see how Becky did that here in just a moment. You read it all the way through once so the kids can understand it and just hear it for enjoyment. Now, this is hard for me because how many of you like to read a book for the first time and you stop and ask 42 questions while you're reading it? Oh, come on, everybody's looking at me. You tell me nobody has ever done that where you're sitting up there and you read it and you ask 42 questions, and at the end you're like, man, you're thinking in your head, I asked some kick-tail questions today. And then you're like, so boys and girls, who can retell the story to me? And they're like, what? Okay, y'all, I sat through a lesson from the coach standpoint, viewing it like the kids would. And I'm like, holy mess, I don't even know what that story was about, and I'm an adult. There is something to be said for reading the book all the way through the first time and then going back. And every day you revisit that book or you revisit another book that you're reading in connection to that. But on the first day, read it to the kids all the way through without interruption so that they can get a full, just a base knowledge of what the story's about, because you really do miss a lot when you stop and ask questions.
So, here's some other vocabulary. I would ask on day 1, we would act out different points of view. We would talk about, because they need to understand how this story relates to the other story. So we would talk about, like, do you have a brother or sister? Do you fight? Do you go to your mom? Do you tell, in class? There's 2 sides to every story, and so we talk about that before we read. And it's great to bring in a nasty strawberry and let them look at it to see that's rotten, and this is, I like bringing stuff in that just blows their mind.
And if you're like me, that would not be hard to do.
Yes, my strawberries are always going bad. So this is one of the tasks that you can do, a daily task. And depending on their proficiency level, they might draw their own pictures, or you might already have pictures for them and they sort. But they still have to talk about it. They don't just sort it and they're done. They have to retell the story, and they can retell with these pictures or they can retell with the pictures that they've drawn. You can do just character and setting the first day if you want, and then the next day you can bring in the problems and solutions in the story depending on your questions and how much time you have. But the kids have to have time to where they can speak to one another and retell the story and talk about it with each other. You also want to give immediate feedback. So I videotape my kids speaking and they've gotten used to it. At first it's kind of weird and they don't really want to be on the iPad, but they love it now. And they're so sweet to each other because you have to create a safe learning environment in your classroom and respect with each other so that they give good feedback to each other. So they video and then they watch each other and they talk about it and they can help each other fill out a rubric when we're talking about it. Did you do a good job of this? I can speak loudly and clearly. Did they do that? And they grade themselves, and the other kids kind of say, yeah, I could hear them. And can I give details about the topic? Were they able to give a lot of details? No, not really. Okay, well, maybe we need to do it again. This is really important, giving visible feedback immediately. The kids need that, and they need to know what they're working on in their speaking, their reading, their listening. And in the classroom, they can come in and tell you, I really need to work on this. Or sometimes I mumble, and Ms. Cogdal says I need to speak clearer, or my friends say that. So these are some sample of questions you might ask on day 2. Who is telling the story? What do the pigs think about the wolf? What evidence in the story shows that they think he is big and bad? You always want to go back to the story and give evidence. So if you have a big book, kids can help you turn and look, or you can put it under Elmo and you can kind of turn and they'll tell you, oh yeah, there. And we talk about illustrators and how they help tell the story. How does that illustration help tell the story? Comprehension, I make comprehension pages and then we take it and we always give immediate feedback. So I give them a marker. I have mine under the Elmo and we grade it together. And then we talk about it, because the kids in your classroom, some of them that have the most language, that should have gotten it all right, they're not very good listeners sometimes. And so you have to figure out, okay, was he just not being a good listener, or did he really not understand this story? So you conference with them out afterwards also. And I mean, I've had a kid that he just thought he was the best. And then when we took these tests, he's like, oh, and he didn't like it that other kids were scoring better than him, so he started listening.
And one of the things you could do, if you've got kids that are past the pointing of the pictures or circling the pictures, making it a little more difficult where they have to write their answers.
And that was just a sample. That comprehension test that I give, they're varied. Some of them, the kids have to write everything, and some of them have pictures, and some of them have some writing and some pictures. It depends on my child and who I'm testing. And they never look at it and say, well, he has got a different one, it's not fair. They know, and it's fine. Day 3, you don't have to read the whole story again. You can look at different parts of the story and pick things out. Like, why does the author say huff and puff more than once with the sticks or the brick than they did with the straw? And so the kids, they think pair share, they start talking about why they think the author used that word more than once, and then we talk about illustrations again, and you can talk about cause and effect. They compare and contrast the story. They talk about this with each other also. This is something we do together, and again, they need to talk while they're doing it. It's not just put them up here and that the room is silent. We talk about each picture and how it relates. This is something to get them engaged into the story. You know, he's asking for a cup of sugar. He doesn't have a cup of sugar for his dear old granny's birthday cake. So you can bring in a cup of sugar. You can bring in these ingredients and talk about, well, how do these things all go together, and get them thinking. They talk with each other and talk about what they are and what they think. You know, sometimes we cook. Ooh, I think we're going to make a cake in here in ESL today. So you let the children, through your questions, you guide them. How does the sugar feel? Is it light? Is it heavy? Is the sugar a solid? Because sometimes they think it's a liquid because you can pour it, but it's not. And you can use magnifying glasses and look at it. It really does have a shape. It's just tiny. You can show like a sugar cane, and it's been broke down, but sugar is a solid. It's not a liquid. It does have a shape. You can talk about, well, I need to make a strong cake, and compare a strong cake to a strong house. How is the sugar and the flour and all of that going to stick together and make a strong cake? I need something. What do you think is going to make it stick together? The egg. So when you're talking about that compared to a house, they start talking about those things. Well, what are we going to do to make our house stay together? They need to have something that's going to make it stick and be stronger. So they talk about different things they could possibly use. So the day they get ready to make their house and they have choices to make, whether it be glue or tape or clay, whatever bonds their materials together, they can make a better choice. This is the end of the week activity, which one was bad. They have to write their answer and tell why. Some kids, again, my newcomers, they really need pictures. So they can circle, if they tell me the wolf is bad, they can circle why and we talk about it. I'm modeled saying some things and they tell me and then I help them to write. Now, some of my kids, at this point, they can tell you all kinds of stuff, and they want another piece of paper, or can they flip it over and write some more? And some of them want to tell you why the wolf was bad, because he blew their house down, and he broke into the pig's house. And some of them want to tell you, well, the pig was bad too, because he ate the wolf, and that was not nice, that was bad. And the wolf was nice and he just needed a cup of sugar, so that the pig was really being bad. So they write about both. So this lends itself to where, depending on where your kids are at, some can do more, some can do less.
And this is what Becky's showing you would be like a guided write. This is also their culminating task for that week. So the culminating task goes with the book. Then if we were building this into a unit, Becky might go into more solids and liquids, bringing another book to go with that, to support that.
And then you always give them feedback immediately if possible. My kids want 4 stars in their writing and in their drawing, and this is where you model. You have to model how to draw a real person, not stick people. Model drawing for them, and then they start doing it. So, and they will ask me, what did I get on my drawing? What did I get on my writing? How many stars? And they'll come in and say, I'm going to get 4 stars today, Miss Cogdal. I know I am. I'm ready. So, and they go back and tell their teachers if they got 4 stars. And some of their teachers are texting me or emailing me so excited that they got 4 stars. So always give feedback.
Our ESL kids at Laverne Primary, 9 times out of 10, they're writing better than the classroom kids, just saying.
And this was their STEM activity. I used blank and blank because, so they choose what they use, and then their discussion, they discuss as a group. When building your structure model, it was better to use heavy items, it was better to use lighter items. Using heavy items or lighter items didn't make a difference. Which one was more important, to be tall, wide, or heavy? And a lot of times when the kids brought it up, they would tell you which way they wanted their house to sit, vertical or horizontal, and they would tell me why they wanted their house to sit that way, because they felt like if they set it horizontal that it had a better chance of not getting blown down because it was wider, not taller. So. And I wish I had pictures. I didn't know I was presenting till the end of school, the last 2-hour day, and everything was packed up, so sorry.
Okay, so after we've done your interactive read aloud, and that's what an interactive read aloud would kind of look like. It's a snippet of, it's much more involved, but like Becky said, these are just snippets for what you can do with this. After you've done an interactive read aloud, then there's the shared read piece. A shared read is something you are going to read with them. It is going to be at the higher end of their grade level, and that is okay because you're supporting them. You're not doing a guided read yet where you're bringing them to the table and giving them their instructional reading lesson at their level. The shared read is something that they have access to it as a whole group. So you would need to project it. It would be a big book. And this is where you really can do some of your foundational teaching as well. You're also looking at vocabulary words that are in that piece that you want to read with them, to pull out and to teach. Whatever you're reading with them for the shared read, it needs to go along with the content. So when we were looking back at that slide where I showed you a text set, I pulled in a book about houses. Becky talked about with her kiddos that she wanted them to understand the difference between what made a strong house and a weak house. So for my shared read, I went to Reading A to Z, which is a great instructional tool if you haven't ever checked that out. There's a wealth of books there on every topic you can think of, on every instructional level.
And some of the books are blank where you can type in the words that you want to go with it?
So I'm pulling that in to set the kids up along with what is my enduring understanding? What am I wanting them to do at the end of the week? Becky wanted them to build a house. So I'm wanting to build their knowledge on different types of houses, different types of structures. So I've pulled in articles, grade level text. And again, when you're looking at your shared read, you want to consider the quantitative measure, the qualitative measure, which is you. And really, guys, I'm going to tell you, that's almost the bigger piece, even though it's a triangle and all pieces work together. If you don't look at that piece and really take it seriously, you really can get some pieces that are not of great quality. Don't just go by that Lexile level or, oh, I've got kindergartners, so I'll read a D book at a D level. Really look at it and understand what they need to know. That's how you're going to make those connections. Once again, like I said, for a shared read, it needs to be accessible for everybody to see, whether it be a big book or posted up here on a screen. But this is where you can teach the kids fluency, or not fluency, but accuracy, phrasing. I mean, you're always teaching fluency, but it's not about just teaching fluency. It's still about teaching knowledge, building knowledge, teaching the content. But then looking at it through the lens of, what foundational skills does this lend itself to teaching as well? And you want to teach it kind of to the general group of what's going in your systematically, what's coming next, what have you already covered. And then remember, you're going to hit the kids in the guided reading table for their specific foundational skills that they need. So again, when you're teaching foundational skills, it's a mini lesson because this is really about getting the kids to hear good modeled fluency of reading, them practicing reading it with you, but building knowledge. Everything has a purpose.
This is one example of a poem that we did with first grade, a shared read, and I put some pictures with it. They can hear tone and things. We do it together, and that was with Force and Motion.
And just very quickly, when you're doing a shared read at the first of the week, it's really heavy teacher supported. You're introducing it, you're teaching the content. But by the end of the week, I want you to notice teacher support here, but now at the end of the week, it's low, heavy high on expectations for kids to be able to read it on their own. And there's ways about doing that. Choral reading, echo reading, partner reading. What you want to be careful with and shy away from is calling a kid out and having them read it in front of the class and putting them on the spot. We like to call it round robin sometimes, but be careful with that because we don't like to be called out. We tend to freeze. That's just not good teaching and practice. So when you're doing your shared read, really think about you're supporting them, and the way they are having access to reading this text is you're there, everybody's there reading it together, or they're echo reading it. You want to take that fear out of it, and they're still being exposed to good quality text.
I create a lot of the books we read at the guided reading table because it's just hard to find sometimes things that go with what I'm teaching and the words that I want the kids to learn. I'll look at, kindergarten, first grade, they have to learn sight words. But instead of just sitting there and flashing their sight words or, just teaching them in a certain order, I think about the units I'm going to teach. When it's all about me, I'm definitely going to teach the word I that week, and it's going to be in our reading. I can, blah, blah, blah. When we're teaching family, I'm definitely going to teach the word we that week. When we're teaching needs and wants, I'm going to teach the word want and have. So I think about what I'm teaching and when I'm going to teach that high frequency word. Here, I, of course, had to teach the word little with the pigs. That's one of the words kindergarten needs to know. So I plan it all out. And then the kindergarten teachers in the building were like, whoa. So they decided this year they're going to do it like ESL. And they get on board. So they've actually come and we've had meetings with them and they're going to get on board with ESL. So that's nice. And again, you can go to Reading A to Z. You can go to Teacher Pay Teacher and change some things. Online science has some books. Your reading series has books. Here's a scan where you can go and get some.
I was going to say, some of the things that we presented on today, I went ahead and put these in a QR code. For Read to Be Ready, there's an interactive toolkit. I went ahead and put that in a QR code. If you scan it, it takes you right there to that. If you want to dabble in that, start there. On the website, everything we've talked about is there. It is a lot. There are a lot of videos. But if you've heard about it, or after you leave here and you're like, I want to know more about that, this will get you started. And then Becky taught the lesson on the 3 little pigs, but Achieve the Core. If you have never checked that website out, it is fabulous. It has lots of interactive read-alouds, text sets, and the true story of the 3 little pigs is there, and that QR code will take you there.
Just really quickly, here's another example of a text set. Newton and Me is a great book. My kids loved it. And it teaches about force and motion. I have my vocabulary. The second day, I'm not going to read everything. I just pick out pages and we talk about certain things. A shared read. There's a shared read we could do from getepic.com. Our Brain Pop has push and pull. And then some guided read. This is one of my guided reading that I do at the table with them. This is in the Wonder series that also can go with force and motion, and you talk about how is this different or the same than our book Newton and Me. And then of course you have your STEM activities, the gravity, we drop things, they have to write about it. How is this experiment like the story Newton and Me? Which page from the story is similar to this experiment? Do you think something's going to drop faster than the other one? They talk about it and then they talk about why, what happened. And then we also do, we just do more STEM experiments and we relate it back to the story. How does this go back to the story? They have to write and explain friction. I had a regular classroom teacher walk in, we were doing this, and she saw what my kids were having to say and she went, oh, if I were you, I'd just get up and walk away from the table. I don't even know how to do that. So she was just like, wow, Ms. Cogdal, why are you making them do such hard stuff? But they can't, like Shannon said, if you plan it all week long, knowing where you want them to be at the end of the week, you can get them there. You just have to plan well.
And these type activities, remember we talked about speaking and listening are the key to good writing. Having the kids do allows them and gives them those experiences to then talk about it. And when you can talk about it, you can write about it. And keep in mind, everything has to be modeled. Modeled reading, that's where your shared read comes in. And you can't expect a kid to write if you haven't first modeled it and talked about it with them and allowed them to share their ideas with you and you be their scribe and then allow them to be a part of that by interactive writing pieces. And model speaking, that's huge. Some of our kids don't know how to talk. They don't know how to pose questions. So
you have to model think, pair, share. You have to model, talking all the time.
It's not just our ESL kids that struggle with that. It's our Gen Ed kids. I spent this week with my first grade teachers, and I said, you're wanting them to do this at the end of the week. So then our question was, how are we going to get them there? And what they discovered along this process is, I got to teach them how to ask questions. And that's going to first starting with me modeling and then providing those scaffolded supports. So as you're planning lessons, you've got to start with that end goal that's coming from your content standards. What are your content standards saying? What do you want them to do? What's that end goal? And then work backwards. You can't go forward if you don't know where you're needing to go.
And just like with vocabulary, think about what you want them to do at the end. And then my kids, they highlighted if they used vocabulary words for the week and how many they used in their writing. So they knew that I wanted them to be able to use those vocabulary words in their writing, and they were responsible for finding them and highlighting them and how they used them, and they talk about it with friends. And then even kindergarten, they use like the sly fox ate him, and you can see they're 4-star writing. So give feedback immediately. They really need that. So.
And you want to see them using that vocabulary in their writing. That's how you know that they've got it. Thank you guys so much.
Yes,
if you have questions, please. Like this was I told Becky just a minute, I said, this is the fastest I think we've ever presented. And especially with Read to Be Ready, it's really in depth. So this, like I said, don't walk away and like this is the gospel truth, because there's a lot more to it that we really didn't go into. But we wanted you to see kind of how it looked like. Here's some information and how it looks. So.
And you can have your apples.
Thank you.
Thank you.